very red town, and now the last election we voted 4 of our 8 reps to be Democrats.
All right.
And one of the reasons that we got in is because we have a PFAS, an industrial polluter in our town with PFAS. So that leads me to my question. Given both the state of an EPA that has been gutted by the current administration and environmental regulations that are not sufficiently protective of human health, what would you do to change this, and how would you hold polluters accountable?
Well, the first thing I would do is not allow oil and gas interests to control the government of the United States. And I'm serious about that. Look, we know what this guy has done. He's put the fox in charge of the chicken house, big time. They're rolling back almost every single thing they get their hands on. The latest outrage, I'm sure you're aware of this, is this effort to change the Section 401 of the Clean Water Act, which is a big deal in my state, and it has to do with a very bedrock principle of states being able to protect clean water. So we have to, the first order of business, probably before I have lunch on the first day, if I'm given this honor, is to roll back all his rollbacks of our environmental protections that came in during COVID. Now, there's some longer-term things we need to do. One thing I think it's important to mention, we know that the fossil fuel industry has sort of controlled Washington, D.C. for a long time now. And it is time to break the shackles of that control. So one of the principal planks in my effort, in my clean energy effort, is that we got to take away those $27 billion of tax breaks for the fossil fuel industry. We got to take that money and put it into clean energy. That's a principle that I stand on for environmental protection. If people know me, they will tell you for the work I've been doing, this has been very close to my heart for a long time. We have had major advances in our state. I want to thank you for your leadership. I'll brag about it on the trail. Thank you for your help.
It was great to hear Governor Inslee mention the 100% clean energy commitment that you led with many other states. An organization that's been a leader on that is the Sierra Club. And next question comes from the New Hampshire State Director, Kathy Corcoran.
Thank you. Thank you. You kind of answered my question, so I have to adapt mine a little bit. In dealing with climate and the climate crisis, how will you scale up kind of your experiences in Washington State? Because for all intents and purposes, a lot of states will not be starting at that level. And so how do we scale up? And how do we address equity when we do this?
Yes. I really appreciate that question. First, on the issue of how we scale up, I really believe that this is an existential threat to our nation's health, just like fascism was in the 40s. And I think we should respond to it the way that Franklin Delano Roosevelt did on December 8, 1941, which was we have to mobilize a full-scale mobilization of the federal government and organize the government around these principles. It cannot be just one agency. Every agency has to be part of this organization now, folks. We're going to have major programs of policies and federal investment to do this and get this job done. Very quickly, let me just run you through, because we're going to propose a very comprehensive package here in the weeks to come. But largely this is using Washington as a template. Look, we need a 100% clean electrical grid in the United States. We need to electrify our transportation system so that we're not putting out CO2 for our transportation system. We need to have a a robust increase of our public transportation infrastructure. When, you know what, we've put a $70 billion package in place, even through a Republican Senate. They can't build a birdhouse in Washington, D.C. 70% of that is clean public transportation with low and zero CO2 emissions. We know that we have to rebuild the stock of our buildings to make them energy efficient, so we're not heating and cooling the outside, right? And that is an enormous job creator. And by the way, that's important to think about because, you know, the fastest growing job in America is solar installer, number one. The second is wind turbine technician. But it's not just this sort of, what you might think of as the technical jobs in clean energy. It's carpenters and laborers and machinists and plumbers who need to rebuild the whole building stock in the United States. That's a massive undertaking. We know that we need to put limits on some of the carbon emissions, and I've been very vigorous on that. I'm the first governor to put a cap on carbon emissions in my state from industrial polluters. We know that we need to demand cleaner transportation fuels, and a clean fuel standard makes sense. We know that we need direct investment in infrastructure by the federal government, as well as these regulatory systems to drive investment and private investment, driving it into these. And so I think all of those things are going to be necessary, and I believe we are fully capable of doing that. Now, your second part of your question, this is really important because we know we need a transition to a clean fuels economy, but we know we need more than just a transition. We need a just transition. Because here's what I believe. This is a mission statement that can address not just one problem, but two. We have an existential crisis in the climate, and we have an equity crisis in the lack of income and equality in the United States of America. And I believe that we have to have a just transition that will simultaneously address this massive income inequality, the fact that working people have not had a raise for 20 years, the fact that young people who are born into poverty tend to stay in poverty, and we can do both at the same time by designing systems that address both issues in a lot of different ways. First, look, the first victims of climate change are most frequently people in poverty, communities of color, the marginalized amongst us. We've got to target our help for them. We've got to target help that when we do these things, we help low-income people. That's why in my 100% bill, I put a provision in to help low-income people with their energy bills. That's in our bill. We also have to help people that might have some challenges during this transition. Think about people in the coal industry. People who have worked in the coal industry are solid, hardworking Americans. They deserve our dignity, and they deserve our recognition that they want a bright economic future. And I believe while we're doing this, we have to do everything possible to give them that future. Let me give you an example of what we've done in Washington. We have one coal-fired plant, and we're closing it. And when we've decided to close it, we did it in a very intentional way to make sure that the community and the working families there had a bright future while we were transitioning away from this industry. So we did several things. Number one, we didn't do it overnight. It was taking years for the transition. Number two, we have created a $55 million fund that will help those families with training, with pension help, with health care, to cushion any of this transition. It also helps small businesses grow in the community, and also helps the civic governments with infrastructure needs. This is the just transition that we need. And I'm glad to be a member of a party who believes in simultaneously saving our grandchildren's health for future generations from climate change and ending income inequality. That's a Democratic message.
Another organizer of tonight's event is Rights and Democracy. Over to you, Heather.
Hey, before I forget, I was asked about PFAS here. I didn't talk about PFAS. I'm looking to you for some advice about this, about the specific solutions you would suggest, and I hope that you guys can share with me.
Actually, I'm going to talk to you later about holding a community meeting in Merrimack specifically to discuss.
Good. I will look for it. And listen, this is throughout the Northern Tier. This is a big issue in Wisconsin,
It's
Michigan, and the first order of business is getting EPA to work. So, we'll talk.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. To you, Heather.
Thank you. So according to a recent report from the United Nations, we only have 12 years to completely change our energy systems before it's too late to prevent a global climate crisis, as you have stated here tonight. As president, would you ban all fossil fuel infrastructure in our country, including fracking, so that we can move toward that 100% clean energy as soon as possible?
Yes, we need to move off of all fossil fuels, and particularly fracked gas, and we need to do it in a time period where we can accommodate it. The question I think that we need to think about is for infrastructure, any infrastructure that we build. I think we should be extremely reluctant to build major infrastructure for fossil fuel processes right now. Because look, if you're doing a fossil fuel infrastructure program and it's got a 60-year life, we can't go that long for fossil fuels. So we have to be extremely reluctant to do those things. And so that's why in my state, we have our 100% rule. The largest oil export facility on the West Coast, I denied a permit for that because it was the wrong thing for the community. I've been opposed to the oil pipeline in British Columbia for that reason. And I think that we've got to recognize that this is just a scientific reality. We just know that if we burn all of the oil and gas and coal we have, you're not going to be able to recognize the planet. And that's just a reality. So we have to move in that direction.
Thank you.
And by the way, Governor, you're looking at a lot of folks who successfully fought the NED pipeline.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you.
Let's move to one of the other Democratic committees. You've heard already from Rod Watkins, but from the new Ipswich Dems.
Okay. My favorite.
So I'm going to change up on you a little bit here and talk about healthcare. As we all know, healthcare is among the most immediate economically pressing issues we face. Various approaches have been proposed, from the elimination of private insurance with a true single payer like Medicare for all, to Medicare as an option to private insurance for citizens under 65, to making adjustments to the ACA. Can you please share with us your healthcare proposal, how you move the country closer to universal healthcare?
Well, this is a several-step process, but the first order of business is to not allow Donald Trump to take away 800,000 people's insurance. We got to remember, we're still in this fight, right? He's trying to strip us of health care. Right. We've had one of the more successful rollouts in the United States of Obamacare. By the way, thank you, Barack Obama, for your leadership on this. And you know, we've had 20,000 people treated for opioid and chemical addiction problems. So he goes around talking about how he cares about opioid epidemic, and he's trying to take away health care and chemical treatment for these folks. So first order of business is to win this battle. Second, I would suggest that my state again has been a template. We hope to be the first state with a public option, true public option. And that bill's going through my legislature right now. This would be the first state to provide it. We also have had some success in integrating mental and physical health, because we know it's crazy to have two different healthcare systems for one person. So these things have borne fruit. On the federal level, we know we have to have universal health care. I believe we have to find a way to do that as fast as we can. We have to get rid of the filibuster, and I'm the first person to say that, because the only way we're going to get health care reform further is get rid of the filibuster. And then I believe the next step should be provide Medicare for everybody who wants it, regardless of age, and bring down the automatic enrollment substantially for automatic, and give everybody an option to enter Medicare into the system, as well as giving us the right to bargain with drug companies so that we don't get hit with these outrageous increases. I think that's the most successful next step. I'm looking forward to doing it. Thank you.
Another question from one of the other small town Democratic committees, Christine from the Temple Dems.
Hi, it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I'm from Temple.
What was your name?
Christine.
Christine. Yeah.
I'm from Temple, and we're a small little town next to New Ipswich, and we did fight the pipeline, and we won.
All right.
Our young children are now safe at this time. Hallie can hear me. Our question is, around 138 million Americans voted in 2016 presidential election. However, this only makes up to 58% of our eligible voting population. Trump won only 27% of the votes. How do we, as a party, get the other 42% of voters to the polls in 2020?
Well, very important question. One of the ways we do that, by the way, before I forget, I think those votes should count. And what that means is I believe we should eliminate the electoral college.
Yes.
So we have been very dedicated and very successful in our state, increasing voter participation. First, by making defeating efforts of the Republicans to suppress the vote. And we have arguably the best voting system in the country because we allow automatic voter registration when you get your driver's license, pre-registration for 16 and 17-year-olds, same-day registration, and most importantly, mail-in ballots, so that everybody can mail in a ballot. Because a lot of people work on election day, it's a trouble, it's a hassle. This increases significantly participation. And this year, I was so committed to it, as I understand millennials, not a lot of millennials have stamps laying around. Have you noticed this? So this year, I dug into our emergency till, and I bought a stamp for every single voter in the state of Washington so that they could vote. And it has been very successful. We also have been doing some sort of creative things, particularly to encourage young people to vote. If young people vote, we'd be a majority party like by 15 percentage points. So one of the recent things that we did is I sponsored a governor's challenge cup. I challenged all the college to see who could register the most voters, and then I gave them a lunch at the residence. And this year, the winner was Washington State University, which was great because I went to the University of Washington. My wife went to Washington State University, and of course that's a huge rivalry. So the Huskies won the football game this year, and the Cougars won the voter registration, so it's a good thing, everybody's happy. This is really important, and it's so vital. The reason I'm so committed to a mail-in ballot is that as long as we, allow local officials in, smaller towns in Alabama to decide where the voter machines go, they're not going to be in the black neighborhoods. They're not going to be in the neighborhoods where now people have to wait for 3 hours to vote. This should be a civil right. And we need a new federal law to guarantee that federal right. And following Washington won't be a bad way to do it. So I hope we do that.
We heard a little bit already about the NED pipeline, but over to Stephanie with a question and some specific requests.
Good evening. So first, I'd just like to thank you for answering these questions in a very detailed manner. I have been meeting with many candidates, and it is really hard to get a very distinct and specific answer, and you're answering the questions that I want to hear, so I appreciate that.
That's how I get in trouble.
Or elected.
Or elected, yeah.
In 2014, southern New Hampshire was threatened by the Kinder Morgan Northeast Energy Direct NED pipeline, as you just heard. It was withdrawn in 2016, but the push for frack gas expansion in New Hampshire has been relentless. Many of the people in this room have been personally engaged in the effort to stop fossil fuel expansion in New Hampshire, including EchoAction. In 2018, every New Hampshire state senator supported the proposed interstate Granite Bridge pipeline. Not a single senator, congressperson, or U.S. senator has called for a moratorium on fossil fuel expansion and use in our state. It's not enough to confirm that climate change is real. We desperately need real climate leadership and a detailed plan that will inspire other countries to join us in action. So I know I heard somebody else ask you this question, but I'm hoping that I'll get a more direct answer. So I want to know if you, in your first 100 days, will you declare an immediate moratorium on fossil fuel infrastructure? You said that we should be really seriously considering those things. I want to know about stopping it. Transition all those fossil fuel subsidies to renewable energy projects. And will you create a plan to reform FERC, removing all their fossil fuel industry funding and requiring climate change and health impacts to be considered when implementing energy projects? I know that's a big question, a lot of questions, but what you can answer would be very helpful.
I'll tackle them. First off, we talked about removing the giant subsidies to the oil and gas industries that exist. This is $27 billion. This is not a small amount of money. But also remember, the subsidy that the fossil fuel industry gets is not just the direct tax code issue. It's a subsidy of allowing them to use our atmosphere as a dumping ground for their pollution. That's a giant subsidy because this is a public asset. We only have one atmosphere. We all breathe it, and they get to use it in infinite amounts with no limit whatsoever right now at zero cost. And as a result, we get a lot of pollution. Now, I don't know about you, but when we go to the dump to dump a pickup load or whatever, like leavings from our prunings, we got to pay $50 or $60 to use that asset as a dump. They're using our atmosphere in limitless amounts with zero cost. So this is the most heavily subsidized industry in world history, and those subsidies have to stop. Both the direct tax subsidies and the indirect subsidy of allowing them to have infinite wastage in our atmosphere. That's why I have put limitations on carbon dioxide pollution in our states and hope to do so on a federal level. On the FERC issue, I'm not sure I'm familiar with exactly what your question is, so I'd like to learn a little bit more after this meeting. But I can tell you that I will be adept and alert to any opportunity to right the ship when it comes to energy policy, and I've been quite direct in this regard. That's why they're suing me. The state of Montana and Wyoming is suing me because the Department of Ecology did not permit the largest coal export facility on the West Coast. And this was a decision by our Department of Ecology. And so I'm being sued over this, so I'm pretty alert to it. As far as the infrastructure, I'll try to be as plain as I can. I don't think we should be building fossil fuel infrastructure that is going to last longer than we can have fossil fuel usage. And I think that we just can't do. Now, when you say infrastructure, I can't say if they got to replace the gas pump down here at Hollis and Main Street, that you're going to say you can't do that, because we're not going to shut off our gas pumps tomorrow morning at noon. So yeah, there's some repair infrastructure that we're going to need to keep things moving in the interim. But we just can't lock ourselves in to 60 or 70 years of infrastructure. That's just too damn good.
Great, thank you.
We've got a Department of our Ecology. Can we get one of those in New Hampshire?
Yeah. Well, and hopefully you're going to get your net metering bill that was vetoed. I want to thank the representatives for that. I know Molly Kelly would have done a great job for you. I talked with her this afternoon about it, so good luck. I hope you win.
I believe we're through the House with a veto-proof majority and a unanimous vote in the Senate. So it's moving. We have one last prepared question, and then we're going to open it up for some more. Over to Laura Lynch. Where's Laura? Right in front of you.
Well, you've already answered my question several times. But I have a question. We did fight Kinder Morgan. We fought hard. But we also educated ourselves and caught them in so many lies, that I feel that, why aren't they being prosecuted for lying to people about what they're doing? And how do we stop that? And I'll just give you the end of my question real quick. My question was about reversing regulations. So we worked really hard to help our PUC with our health laws. We did so much, and now I feel like we're just fighting an endless battle because he's trying to change everything that we worked so hard as far as Kinder Morgan was concerned. And now with this Granite Street Bridge project that they're trying to pull on us, they're lying to these people because they're offering them millions of dollars of money, but in the proof of looking back at other states or cities that they've offered money to, these people haven't gotten the money. So how do we stop this, and why aren't they being prosecuted for lying to these states?
So one of the ways we stop them is we take them to court, and my state has done that vigorously and repeatedly. I was the first person to sue on the Muslim ban. We've been very active on the child separation issue, and I'm pleased to stand before you and tell you that Washington versus Trump, we are 18-0. We have beaten 18 times. We have a very good and active AG named Bob Ferguson. We work together closely on that. Listen, that's how we do it. Now, I'll give you the good news. This is a group that is so incompetent, they don't know how to repeal a rule. So when they try to repeal a rule, 99% of the time they stub their toe and they don't do it the right way. So we get it thrown out in court. So we just got to continue to fight these brush battles every time. We got to sue them and win as many as we can. Then we got to get the president.
How do we fight them with the Republican governor who thinks that they're the best things to, since I...
And how do we keep them from silencing people, which is their effort right now?
We elect these great legislators. That's one of the ways we do it. We get some more friends for them next election cycle. I mean, literally, that's how we do it, right? We get active and we don't get discouraged. And I think not being discouraged is important at this moment. I know we have anxiety and discouragement and frustration, but I have found the most important renewable fuel is perseverance. We got to persevere here. We got to band together and get to the firing line and elect people to do this work. By the way, I see this is not a union thing, but you made me think about something I've forgotten. In this transition, when I talked about a just transition to a cleaner energy, I think we have to use this a way to revitalize the union movement in the United States. We have allowed the degradation of working people's rights to continue unabated for several decades. And we now have to give a right to people to really organize without fear of being fired or abused somehow. And that means having a card check, it means having an NLRB that actually functions. It means doing what I've done, which is in my contracts, put project labor agreements so we can encourage organized labor, put prevailing wage rates with real rates, and have really good overtime rules, and I'm probably going to have the best overtime rules in the country here shortly. We got to do things that will allow working people to have meaningful rights again, and I'm dedicated to that. And I think this clean energy revolution we're going to start, it can be a perfect moment to do that. So thanks for reminding me.
I do apologize. The governor has a lot of people to meet and has an event up in Concord at 7. So I'm told we have time for one more question, and I am so sorry. I'm going to put it right here in the front. Give us your question, and we'll wrap it up and leave a few minutes for him to shake some hands.
Yeah. Governor, a lot of people are waking up now to the continuing threat of nuclear annihilation, another existential threat. We did not get rid of all of our nuclear weapons after the Cold War. On the contrary, there are 14,000 nuclear weapons in the world today, almost all of them owned by the U.S. and Russia. So I want to ask you what you will do to prevent nuclear war, and specifically, do you oppose the $1.2 trillion total rebuild of our nuclear arsenal that's going on? Thank you.
Yeah, really important question. First off, I'm going to eliminate a person who is the most chaotic non-thinker in American political history.
That's good, but
that's number one. It didn't start with him, right? I'll tell you what, this is more a nascent thought than a specific plan at the moment. But our total focus has been reduction in the number of nuclear weapons. And I think that's important. And I would support continued reduction of nuclear weapons. I also support the Iran deal because I think it is the best possibility to restrain the nuclear power in Iran. And to tear that thing up and give them the right to move forward, I think is really a mistake. But I think we need to have a new strategy on nuclear warfare, which is to get these weapons off of a hair trigger. This is craziness to have over 10,000 nuclear weapons on a hair trigger that can be launched in 8 or 9 minutes. This is just a recipe for Holocaust. And so I really am interested in trying to advance at least the beginning of a discussion. How do we get to a situation where at least they can't be launched, where there's enough period of time to talk to one another so that you can also not have accidental launches? Look, we have had 2 situations in the last 20 years where either the US or the Soviet Union believed they were under nuclear attack for about 10 minutes. You think about the ramifications by accident. So I want to open up a new phase of really arms control so they're not on a hair trigger. I think that's really important. All right.
I'm so sorry, folks, that we are out of time.
So
we'll be back many times. So give us some closing words and come back.
Closing words. Thank you for what you're doing. Thanks for electing great legislators. I want to ask to get to know you better. I hope you'll take a look at our issues. I hope you give some thought. If you want this climate change issue on the debate stage, I need 65,000 people to send in $1 or more. And if you can help, even if you're going to support multiple candidates or you don't know who you're supporting, if you can help to make sure I'm on the stage in June, that would be very much appreciated. And again, early bed, early rise, work like hell and organize. Let's go get your president. Thanks a lot.